Welcome to the Industry Day and the first day of the International Conference on Emerging Technologies and Factory Automation. It will be a busy day, an agenda full of insights, inspiration and information on the latest technological trends. You will meet experts from various fields, all live broadcasted from this studio. Prepare yourselves for 3 hours of live entertainment. Let's go! Welcome back to the studio, where all today's action is going to happen. My name is Ola Norén, and I'm the chairman of the board at Automation Region, and hence I have the privilege to welcome you all and set the scene for the coming days. EFTA 2021 is the 26th annual conference of the IEEE Industrial Electronics Society. It starts today and will be held online until September 10th. The conference focuses on novel ideas, emerging trends, research results, and practical achievements. The first day we call Industry Day, and is organized by Automation Region. A member-driven cross-industry cluster continuously working to stimulating innovation and automation. Today, during the Industry Day, we will focus on the industry and its developments. We have chosen today's tagline from innovation to transformation to emphasize the need for change in mindset for the industry to grasp the opportunities in the new technological advancements being made. Some of them being presented here today, so stay vigilant on how you can implement what is presented. In this studio, we have gathered expertise from academia and the industry to give you an understanding of the transformative trends that happens in the industry and hence affects us all. I am grateful for all of you joining today. Having you with us is a guarantee that we make the industry more competitive, resilient, and open to change. I encourage you all to leave a comment in the chat to make this more of a dialogue and increase the interaction. After today, I hope that you bring with you a lot of inspiration and insights, but most of all, 3 things. First, that you got insights of the trends that drives the industrial transformation today. Second, that you learned what industrial technology, InTech, is, and why InTech is the new lean of the industry. And third, how automation and InTech can increase competitiveness and make the industry more sustainable. As you can see, there is much to discuss, and we only have until lunch to wrap it all up. I will therefore leave the floor to the best moderator one can find, a role model in digitization, in cooperation, and a person with a lot of challenging insights. Today's moderator is Beata Wickbom, who has long experience as an advisor to organizations on digital strategy, business development, and innovation. Again, a warm welcome from all of us at Automation Region. Now, over to you, Beata.
Thanks, Ola, and thanks for including me in this event. We're so happy to have participants from all over the world joining us today. I'm actually in a studio in Västerås, the capital of automation and industrial transformation in Sweden. Our theme today is from innovation to transformation. And I'm also curious, and I think everyone is curious about all of us who are here today, in what way does this theme relate to what you do? Are you a researcher, an AI expert? Are you a manager or an expert in some other field? Could you also please just give us an ID in the chat? That's also a way for you to connect between each other and just give us a sense of what you can contribute with in the dialogue. So like Ola said in the beginning, me personally, I'm really interested in transformation and about the theme we have today, which is a lot about going from innovation to seeing opportunities to actually seizing them, to implement and start experimenting on large scale. We see a lot of that in all areas of society, but I think industry is really leading the way and paving the way for also a lot of interesting collaboration models, which we'll be discussing later today. So who are you in the audience? Can you just give us an ID in the chat? We know we have a lot of industry experts, we have researchers, a lot of experts from academia, like Ola said, a researcher in machine learning, great, a PhD student, oh great. I hope we're going to have a lot of students here today, because this will be a great opportunity for learning and also getting some more insights on applied technologies. PhD student, hi Natalie, a PhD student, a professor. Wonderful. Keep filling out in the chat. It gives us also a sense of community in these times where we're being a bit remote. But I do actually feel close to you when we do use the chat. And for two of our keynotes, we'll have them with us live, and you have an opportunity for asking them your questions, also by using the chat, which I will be moderating. So I'll be telling you when there's an opportunity for live questions as we go forward. Anything else you want or you're curious about, use the chat, because I'll be checking it continuously. Okay, it's time for our first guest. Ron Bodkin. He is the VP of AI engineering and CIO at Vector Institute in Canada. It's an independent, non-for-profit corporation dedicated to research in the area of AI. He's also the engineering lead at the Schwartz-Reisman Institute for Technology and Society. And previously, Ron held the role as responsible for applied AI in the Google Cloud CTO office. He will share how the Vector Institute applies AI research to scale transformation in industry and society. Here's Ron Bodkin.
Hi, I'm Ron Bodkin, VP of AI Engineering and CIO at the Vector Institute, and also engineering lead at the Schwartz-Reisman Institute for Technology and Society. I'm going to talk to you about the Vector Institute, a world-class AI research institute based in Canada, and how we scale the benefits of AI research to industry, health, and more broadly to society. To start, I'll introduce the Vector Institute with a little bit more about who we are and the history and how we work. Then I'll talk about applying AI and how AI is having an impact in a wide variety of fields more broadly. And then I'll talk specifically about case studies, about how we're engaging in Vector to bring great research to life in practical applications that benefit a variety of stakeholders, as well as our thinking about responsibility in using AI to mitigate harm and maximize benefit, as well as some thinking about how we've been engaging with small and medium enterprises, as well as larger industry players. Vector is an independent not-for-profit that's focused on research in the field of AI, specifically machine learning, and within the area of machine learning, deep learning. Our chief scientific advisor, Jeffrey Hinton, is a Turing Award winner in this area and is one of the key inventors of concepts in deep learning that have led to a renaissance in AI in today's workforce and more broadly in adoption in many sectors. At Vector, we are focused on developing workforce knowledge in AI and bringing that great research forward with university partners and making it accessible and useful in a variety of sectors, whether it be larger enterprises, startups, health partners, or more broadly for application in government. So we see tremendous opportunity in using AI to foster economic growth and improve the lives of Canadians. You can see in this picture Some of the team at Vector, including Jeffrey Hinton with fellow Turing Award winners, Joshua Bengio and Jan LeCun, and our CEO, Garth Gibson, as well as many of the other staff and scientists who were present at the time of this award ceremony. At Vector, we have a community of now over 600 researchers with deep expertise in all areas of machine learning and deep learning, and have rich experience in entrepreneurship. So we have a lot of knowledge about how to connect this great research to commercial success. At Vector, we engage with our business ecosystem to help apply AI in a number of ways. This includes providing hands-on opportunities to work with AI techniques for professionals at associated industry organizations in helping them implement AI and apply leading-edge research. We create non-competitive environments where we can collaborate on projects. And I'll talk more about some examples of some of the kind of projects we've done and the kind of work that we've done collaborating with sponsors. We also provide training and knowledge transfer, helping the staff at our ecosystem companies stay up to date with the latest techniques and spot opportunities to use them in their business. We provide a lot of one-on-one guidance by consulting with leading researchers and practitioners in our organization, helping our sponsors and the broader community understand what are some of the key opportunities from recent research and how to address specific challenges and opportunities in their business where AI might now be able to drive results or where new techniques might improve what's possible. We also do a lot to help recruit talent, connecting qualified graduates, a lot of the great talent that's emerging with AI skills to new opportunities in business. For example, we have an AI master's program where we partner with over 20 universities to identify curricula that qualify students to bring advanced talent in AI and then connect them to companies that are looking for that talent. So we work in a variety of areas at Vector. And now let me turn to a little bit of some of the opportunity, why we're seeing so much interest in using AI in business applications. You're probably familiar with how the advances in deep learning are bringing AI techniques to technology firms. So in the area of search and recommendations, we've seen advances like large language models being applied to improve search at companies like Google, and the use of deep learning to drive improved recommendations at companies like Facebook and YouTube. We're also seeing a lot of interest in conversational AI with technologies like Siri and Alexa being popular for consumers to allow not only language understanding, but also advances in advanced speech recognition and speech to text generation. These same technologies are also gaining a lot of interest and prevalence in the industry context, such as in call centers. And we're seeing a lot of interest in our industry community in this area as well. So that's one locus of applications. We also see a lot of interest in applying AI in the healthcare arena. At Vector, we've worked on problems like enhancing radiology. So being able to look at scans to detect potential conditions like cancer and to provide explanations. We don't see this as replacing qualified physicians, but instead as an assistant to help them do a better job diagnosing, perhaps provide a second check or an additional source of input to improve the quality of care. Another system that we've worked on, some of our researchers have worked on, is a system to predict cardiac arrest, feeding in a variety of different signals that can allow early detection by just a few minutes of a patient who's at imminent risk of a heart attack, which can make all the difference in terms of being able to intervene to save their life. We also see a lot of opportunity to apply AI for social good in areas like climate change. Computer vision techniques can be used to detect deforestation and even predict where it's going to happen to allow mitigation. We have significant investment with leading faculty working on materials discovery using AI techniques, which can improve the efficiency and effectiveness of battery and fuel cells, and of course, improving energy storage is a key part of allowing renewable energy sources to displace carbon-emitting energy sources. We'll talk more about specific applications of energy management optimization subsequently, because we've done a project relating to it and we have a sponsor that did it. And we see a lot of opportunity to use AI in biodiversity research as well. So AI techniques are being applied in important areas in ESG, and we see a lot of interest in our ecosystem around these topics as well. With that in mind, let's turn to some case studies of how Vector is engaging with industry and how we're creating value in doing so. Now, let's turn to more practically how we engage to create that value with our ecosystem. At Vector, we have recently started an engineering team whose mission is to connect the great research with technical artifacts and technical implementation that enables the success of industry partners, health partners, and broader societal good. The way we engage is we have a number of triggers that can lead to interest. We can have sponsors that are interested in a topic, and in discussions with them, we identify a recurring theme where there's a need or opportunity for expanding how new AI research might help. We can see from researchers who've come to us or come up with great new ideas, opportunities to bring them forward and apply them. And we get requests from researchers around how engineering techniques might support their needs, and often those can be transferred into industry as well. So there's a range of different ways that we can trigger projects, but consistently what we like to do from there is to work on a quick demonstration of what's feasible, a proof of feasibility that leads to an MVP, minimum viable product, that can then be tested and used by different partners to do their own proof of concept. This can be done in a short hackathon or boot camp in a 1 week period where different participants can get hands-on with technologies and try them. For example, we're at the stage of putting a privacy enhancing technologies boot camp together this fall, where sponsors can try out federated learning, differential privacy, and homomorphic encryption, where we vetted different libraries and made it easier to test them out and use them in practical use cases. This then can lead, after that, sponsors can immediately see how to apply the techniques in their own business. And it can also lead to longer collaboration projects where you can have multiple companies working together over a course of a few weeks to do a longer worked example of how to really achieve meaningful results with AI. Inside the company, that then often leads to deployment of products, as we'll hear about. And at Vector, we will often follow those projects by publishing white papers, but also open sourcing software, releasing data sets, and for techniques that mature, create training so that they can be repeated beyond an initial project. As an example of one of these projects, a couple of years ago, with the emergence of large language models, we had a lot of interest in understanding how they could be applied in different industries and made useful for business purposes. We had a lot of success with sponsors doing a variety of different applications. For example, Thomson Reuters looked at using BERT language models to improve the quality of search when customers were looking in their legal or tax databases. They were able to come up with better features out of the language understanding that these models have to re-rank or improve the order in which results were shown to users to improve the quality of those results. Based on that success, they've been able to apply it and are looking at both expanding the scope of what can be done with NLP, as well as looking at other domains where it might be relevant. In that same project, we also had one of our sponsors at the Bank of Montreal look at a different problem, which is how to customize language models, but in their case, to better understand the sentiment of discussion about financial markets. So to be able to understand if there were positive or negative views about things like a given stock. They were able to tailor data sets and fine-tune NLP models to understand this problem. And even though their lead participant had not worked with NLP before, she was able to create models that subsequently were able to be deployed to benefit their capital markets team, which significantly accelerated their progress in using these exciting new techniques. We also had other sponsors in the project achieve significant results. Manulife, an insurance company, was able to use NLP techniques to automate document classification out of their experience with this project. And in fact, they created an in-house academy to replicate the learnings to scale knowledge more broadly in their organization on how to use language models. Likewise, Accenture participated and were able to use this to accelerate the development of an information extraction engine that they use with their customers, as well as collaborating on fairness, explainability, robustness, and risk management. So you can see as this one example how taking the idea of recent advances in language models and exploring how that could be fine-tuned and applied to a variety of industry contexts generated a lot of value for different companies. More recently, we've completed a project around computer vision, where we were able to create demonstrations with sponsors and our engineering team with open source software. A couple of interesting examples of capabilities we demonstrated were anomaly detection, being able to identify unusual characteristics of an image that would be indicative of risk of a defect in manufacturing, as well as being able to do 3D analysis on videos. So being able to look at, in this case, videos of lung scans to be able to distinguish between healthy patients, patients with pneumonia, and patients with COVID. So in these cases, the results of these projects were accelerating knowledge of how to work with complex and varying data, how to use techniques to detect anomalies and work with a variety of videos, and has led to interest in deploying visual inspection for manufacturing using deep learning techniques, as well as video analysis in commercial applications rather than health applications from sponsors. We've also conducted industry collaboration projects in a number of other topics. A few more include a health project, which has looked at how to improve patient outcomes and better serve customers by allowing them to take health data and opt into sharing it to improve how they are served by commercial health offerings. Dataset Shift project, which was recently, we've had the leads for this project have been accepted to the ECML conference. And this talks about how one can deal with machine learning models, AI systems, when data sets suddenly change, when some of the underlying conditions have radically shifted. This was triggered by sudden changes in supply chains and consumer behavior with the lockdowns and ensuing disruption to the economy of the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, model-based reinforcement learning. An interesting outcome of this project was TELUS, a large telecommunications company in Canada, was able to demonstrate a model that would optimize cooling a data center and reduce energy required to do so by 15%. This was validated in a real-world setting. And not only are they looking at how to deploy this, but also looking at how the same kind of model could be used to save energy in other systems like cell towers and agriculture. At Vector, we also are engaged in a variety of projects around responsible AI, whether it be Trustworthy AI as a project to help sponsors think about governance and risk management and what are the technologies that allow them to do things like ensure fairness and improve interpretability of models. Project Pensive, in which we're applying content analysis in AI to let users have more control over the kind of content they would see in recommendations, such as being able to filter out uncivil language or prefer more objective language, as well as more diverse content. We're also working with closely Schwartz Reisman Institute on that and on Trustworthy AI, and indeed on all of these projects. Another shared initiative with Schwartz Reisman is the Trusted Data Sharing Lab, which is about creating both technical infrastructure, such as the Privacy Enhancing Technologies Bootcamp, but then also the legal infrastructure. So how can one apply privacy enhancing technologies to enable positive uses of data? So how can you allow for opt-in and allow for beneficial uses of machine learning, such as in health, while still having an appropriate privacy preservation? We also are working on projects around improving fairness, so understanding, detecting and mitigating unfair bias, as well as explainability are important areas of focus as well for us. In addition to working with larger enterprises, Vector is also working with smaller enterprises, smaller companies, including startups and scale-ups. As some examples, we're working with a startup that is helping improve hiring called Nakri. They came to a course we did on bias in AI. And in that course, they learned a lot about detecting and remediating bias. And their team did a capstone project where they demonstrated a way to actually mitigate bias that is relevant to their product. And they're planning to implement that. So they learned a lot about an important area and ended up improving their business, improving their product by implementing this in future. We also work with Tealbook, which was excited to consult with Vector faculty member Frank Redditch on how they can best apply techniques to solve some of their text processing needs, such as text summarization. They're an e-procurement company, so applying the latest AI techniques, but also judgment on what are the balance of techniques, including more traditional machine learning, was valuable to them. We're also working with startups in the agriculture sector, such as one that is doing robotic harvesting. And we've been able to help them understand how computer vision and advances in data models can help them develop a competitive advantage. And in logistics, where we're helping an innovative startup apply AI and scale their workforce to drive predictive maintenance that will help them compete and create value in industry in our local ecosystem. As another area where we're helping startups and scale-ups, we see a ton of opportunity around regulatory technology. So technology to help increase visibility for auditing and tracking what's going on in AI systems to better have control and to mitigate any unintended outcomes. This is an area that Schwartz Reisman has been investing, and we're excited to see more collaboration in future. So in conclusion, we at Vector are a leader in AI research and applications. This research is creating new business opportunities in enterprises and small and medium-sized businesses as well. And we're excited about collaborating with industry to accelerate this value through knowledge transfer, collaborative projects, creating open source, and rich interactions with the research community. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Ron Bodkin. I'm joined by my sidekick, Fredrik Brun, here in the studio, Chief Evangelist in Digital Transformation at Junibap, a Swedish scale-up designing innovative automation. How are you, Fredrik?
Very good, and thank you for being here today.
We're going to talk briefly about what we just heard, but first, what's on top of your agenda in September 2021?
So I have a very interesting agenda. We are actually removing the boundaries for cloud computing from the terrestrial bound networks into space. And we just yesterday announced that we have now successfully deployed what's called Space Cloud in space, so that you can deploy AI applications in space just the same way you do on ground.
What are the new opportunities?
The new opportunities is that you, as an end user, can get low latency data from space. So for instance, if you have hurricane watching or you have flooding monitoring, you can get almost instantaneous reporting from space on a global scale, where traditionally it takes maybe a week or months to get that data.
What has been the main challenge for you and your team?
The biggest challenge is to get the computers working in a radiation environment. So you have a lot of background radiation in space coming from the sun, and that really destroys the electronics. So even though all of the infrastructure looks the same for a user, it's really different under the hood.
And what are you doing on ground?
And what I do on ground is to push digital transformation in smart industry. And I do this part of the company and as part of my adjunct professorship with MDH as well in robotics and avionics.
So you're here today to help us sort of translate or draw some conclusions from our keynotes. So let's just dive into Ron Bodkin's speech that we just heard. Will AI replace humans?
Now, that's a very interesting question, and it's on top of everyone's mind, I would guess. It depends what you mean with replace humans. So we are going to create a new marketplace. We're going to create new jobs where the humans and machines really work together. And we are going to have a decision support system by AI for the coming 10, 15 years. But if you look out another 20 years, maybe 25 years, you're going to start to see what's called strong AI. You're going to see real artificial intelligence at the same scale and level as humans. And that's the point where you can start to talk about being replaced by machines. But already now we're starting to see a lot of different applications replacing humans to some extent, but also strengthening human capabilities to other extents as well. But it will not, in the coming 10, 15 years, be a complete replacement. And I don't think it will ever be a complete replacement, but it will be a more and more dominant part of our society.
Ron just showed us some interesting applications pointing the way. Where would you say that we should look for applications that are really sort of groundbreaking and that are also paving the way for strong AI applications?
So they are actually everywhere. As you saw from this presentation, he had at least 6 or 7 different applications. So you're seeing this in medtech, for instance. And I think that's one of the core things. Because if you're looking at cancer treatment, for instance, that is so similar to many other applications. So if we can solve that.
In what way?
In the image processing and the way you do analytics associated with that. So that's a very important aspect. And then, of course, you have the defense area, which is always a technology driver as well.
Where the budgets are large as well.
And the budgets are large, absolutely, as well. And you're going to see the so-called triple Ds, the dull, dangerous, and dirty works being replaced early on with AI. And just here in Sweden, for instance, we have a fully autonomous mine.
Where?
Up north. It's Boliden and ABB have a partnership with Ericsson to also introduce 5G. So they experiment with all that in that mine.
So as we see AI solving more and more critical challenges and we are more and more assisted by AI, how do we know, or how are we going to know when to trust AI-empowered decision-making? For example, say in a legal case.
That's an extremely interesting question. And as you saw from the presentation, trustworthy AI was one of the main topics. And this is super important because what is ethics? When you train and model AI, it's going to have influences by human behavior. And what kind of human behavior do we encapsulate into the algorithms? What do we want to encapsulate and what don't we? And this has to be discussed. There is a lot of work being done on the European Union level in Europe on this. But you can imagine the differences in different cultures when looking at AI and what is a decision in one country from another. It could be different. And when you talk about legal frameworks, we have different legal systems in almost every country in the world. And this is also being reflected on the AI as well.
So what's the way forward here to sort of create a common ground for treating or actually just addressing the issues?
Well, one of the biggest things I said is that we have to lift this to the government level. We have to talk about this in Parliament, for instance. And once we agree in Sweden what it means for us, we have to talk at the European level, and we also have to talk at the United Nations level. But I think, at least in a Swedish context, we have to put this into a reference system for us. And I don't think we really have done that. I haven't seen a full day or 2 full day discussions in Parliament about these issues.
In your view, what are the critical factors when scaling AI applications or when scaling the technology? Ron was highlighting this as an opportunity, of course.
Of course, and I think you just made a point about the legality of this. As you scale AI, and when you start to see it being deployed in many, many different places, it comes back to insurances, it comes back to the legal framework. What happens if AI goes bananas, for instance? If you have a self-driving car and that car goes bananas, there isn't any detailed legal framework today to say exactly what should happen. And it's the same thing if you take an industrial application and the AI hurts a worker in a factory. Is it the company or is it the machine who has the liability? And these questions will be amplified as we deploy AI to more and more different places.
We have a lot of those forums for ethical AI, and can you just point us to some of these discussions for anyone who's interested?
So one of the big discussions is being held by OpenAI. I can really encourage people to look at the OpenAI website. They have a very long list of 22 different points that addresses different topics of this. And those 22 points, if we can make them into a global framework that is accepted by the United Nations, would go a long way to address these issues.
What other key takeaways do you have after Ron Bodkin's keynote?
What's really striking to me is that there are so many different applications. Even though I'm also a researcher in this field, I still see new applications every day of AI. So they are popping up everywhere. So it's not a fluke. It's not a one area thing. This is going to happen across the board, and it's going to happen very fast. And this is also one of the challenges that Ron is pointing to as well, that the politics have to go with the same momentum as the rest of the community. Otherwise, we will have AI that supersedes the politics.
Other takeaways?
Other takeaways, as you saw, was the natural language processing, or NLP, that we are now using NLP in all different applications. He mentioned financials, for instance. So there are large swaths of the work industry that will be replaced by AI, and that we need to retrain them for different jobs in the future. And this retraining has to happen very quickly, and that will be a societal change.
So natural language processing,
yes.
I mean. I would imagine that there are so many new areas where we can sort of learn from conversations, whether in text or in language,
Yes.
in speech, in new ways. Where should one look for really interesting applications? Is it in the area of learning, or is it collaboration? Is it management?
I would say that depends on the culture. If you're living in a market economy, you would obviously pursue where the value is. And the value today is to make fast decisions. So if you can find applications where it makes a big difference to make a decision fast, that's where the computers can excel and beat us as humans.
We have a lot of PhD students today. So finally, in what areas would you like to see more research?
There are so many areas that we need to look at, but I think one of the major ones that has been a little bit put aside is the ethical aspects of AI and the impact in society. So we, in Sweden at least, we have a long tradition of working on new technologies and gadgets and cool things, but we tend to forget the societal impacts of what we do. So I think that's an area that can be strengthened.
So that's advice for all of you PhD students to also focus on that area. We will take a short break, go get another cup of coffee, and see you back in 5 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. After our next two keynotes, you have an opportunity for live questions because our speakers will be joining us live. So feel free to use the chat and I will direct your questions to our guests. It's a real opportunity for you to get the answers that you need. She is the CEO of Zensact, a company with the mission to create software for autonomous cars and the next generation of advanced driver support. She was previously the Chief Digital Officer of Volvo Cars. Here is Erdjad Andersson. Hi, Erdjad. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm great. This is a great topic to discuss, the transformation of a classic industry into a more autonomous and more software-based industry. What's on top of your agenda in September 2021?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, the industry is changing, and I always tell people I think this is like the most exciting place to be right now. And in Zensact, we develop software for autonomous driving, and I think what's really fascinating is how this has gone from a lot of kind of focus on the AD as such to for us it's always been about safety. And right now we're actually approaching where we're going into the last hardening phase of our first product on the new generation. So on our agenda right now is really full focus on our coming product launch.
Great. When is that planned for?
Yeah, so late next year we will go live on the platform that supports both Polestar and Volvo, and that's basically the starting point for this generation of system.
And just to get those acronyms clear, when you talk about AD, it's autonomous driving, right?
Yes.
For our viewers.
Yeah.
So give us a better understanding of Zensact's purpose and how you intend to deliver on that purpose.
Yeah. So really at the core, and we're a company that was born out of the heritage of Volvo Cars. So at the core of what we do, we look at autonomous driving and advanced support for drivers as a safety thing. Basically, we know from data in the field that most of the situations where there are severe accidents with outcomes, either severe injuries or death, is really where the human is unable to manage the situation. And it may be various reasons. It can be things, simple things like you're distracted, or it can be a medical condition, or it might be that you're intoxicated, things like that. So basically, advancing automation in cars helps safety, and that's really where we come from. And we talk about having the vision that zero severe accidents should be happening. And I think that makes it very exciting. It's, of course, a very difficult problem to solve engineering-wise, but the good news is that all this tech that we now do to really enable full autonomy is also usable in the case where the driver is driving and we can support them. So for us, that means we can actually add safety in all kinds of driving.
I quote from your website that the latest advancements in the field of autonomous driving software development have resulted in the engineering challenge of the century. What is at the core of that challenge, would you say?
Yeah, and it's really that making a car drive autonomously in most use cases is not that hard. And I think we learned that already many years ago, that you can actually make advanced demos, you can drive around, and as long as things are acting normal in traffic, it's a quite doable thing. The trick is that in order for this to work, it needs to actually be better than when humans drive, and humans are actually quite good at perceiving the world around them and acting on that. So basically, not just in all these normal cases, but in all the rare cases, corner cases of what might happen, we also need to be able to manage those. We need to see what's going on, we need to recognize what that means, and then we need to act on it. And that's really the challenge, not the 95% of cases, but the few percent of really difficult cases.
I see. And just you talk briefly about your relationship to Volvo. Tell us more just so we understand the connection.
Yeah, so basically we're a company that's the majority owner is Volvo Cars. And of course, we are also working with them as the lead customer for our new product. So the services we will be launching are first going live with Volvo and Polestar, but we also have the intent to bring that to a broader market after that age. And I think the interesting thing with the things we develop now, and if you talk about transforming of the industry, in the old days, it used to be that cars were actually quite heavy on software a long time ago. But the fact that you have the combination of software with connection, so you can actually upgrade the software, and in our case, quite advanced machine learning AI systems in the car, that means that as we roll this out, we cannot just make the new cars better. We can keep making those cars that we roll out better all the time. And that means when we develop things, we add safety on the roads. And that's actually totally new for the industry.
So let's talk about the way you work, because by doing so, one really understands the difference between traditional industrial ways of working and the new mindset of acting like almost like a software company. And I'd like to talk about more how you've designed your processes. Because you've experience from working with transforming traditional industries. You were at Volvo Cars previously. What's the biggest difference in terms of how you work? If you would compare, if we call Volvo Cars a more traditional company compared to Zenseact?
I mean, it's in some way it changes everything, and I think that's what makes it a transformation. And you say we're almost like a software company. Zenseact is a software company. We're 600 people, and all we do is software. And I think the reason we created Zenseact from the beginning was really to enable that as well, to really form around a modern software company and ways of working. And we basically do software the way everybody else does advanced embedded software, as well as AI then, which also brings its new ways of working. Then integrating into an industry that's traditionally quite driven by hardware has some challenges. Because I think the great thing, as I was talking about before, what we do is that we can actually roll out new software all the time. But that means, that's exactly how we will keep doing it. But that also means that the processes you have in a traditional company, they're normally not made for that. And it's not just the sales process. It's everything from, you connect with the user online. They're all of a sudden, they can find the product in a different way. They can order it in a different way. You can actually set up a subscription instead of buying a car, for instance. But it also rolls back to how you plan projects, which used to be like planned from a hardware timeline, and there were certain milestones when you did things, and then, as you roll out of the factory, that was the best the car would ever be. And with software, that changes everything, because then a few weeks later, you roll out a new version, and a few weeks later, a new version. And then you need new methods to ensure that all these are doing as well as the old one on the stuff that was there before, and adding new value. So it basically changes all the processes.
Yeah, so one could say that the biggest process is that in the old model, the product was done in a way, finalized when it was bought by a customer, but you constantly continue to improve that product or service that you've built for the customer.
Exactly. So what you get as a customer is really a platform that will keep growing. And it's much like your cell phone or your computer. It's not actually what you get in your hand when you get it. It's also the promise of all the things that will be added and that you can add.
Like you said before, you're not the only ones building software. You're not the only ones in the world building software for autonomous driving, focusing on safety. How would you say that you make sure that you and your team become the best globally at what you do?
I think the big key is to have live data. And I mean, really, it's not, I mean, I have a super smart team, no doubt about it, but there are a lot of other companies out there with a super smart team as well. I think as you mentioned before, we're rolling out with Volvo. They've taken a very interesting and super brave decision to really standardize hardware to a large degree, which means that all their cars will be able to provide data, and that data is really the key to improving all the time. So getting the solution out there, getting data back, and getting the volumes of that, because that means that we can learn all those new rare cases that we need to know about from the entire fleet, even those that don't have an active service. We can still collect interesting learnings in near accidents or accidents.
So those kind of strategic partnership, what do they require you to do in order to be easy to collaborate with? Like, how do you set up the way you work so that those collaborations are really smooth and also speedy?
Yeah. Well, that's probably $1 million question. I read a book once that said you have to love each other a little bit. And I think that's actually very true. You have to find somebody who shares your vision of what you want to do. So like I mentioned, we're working with Luminar. It's not just that they have a product that we like. It's actually that they have the same vision as we do to make a safer traffic in the future. So I think it starts there. You really need to have that in the bottom. Otherwise, you will keep pulling in different directions. And then you need to build relationships with each other so you have some trust. And my experience is that once you get to that level where you kind of share the vision and you have a good relationship with each other, you can solve a lot of problems. And there will always be problems. It's true if you do something internally. It's true if you do something with a partner.
Let's look forward to and talk about self-driving cars, which you are an expert on. What role will self-driving cars play, say, in the near future, say, in 3 years' time? And when you talk about your long perspective, tell us what that perspective is and what role will they have in the longer perspective?
Yeah. I mean, the most common question I get when I talk to journalists, for instance, is when will cars be self-driving? And I think it's really a little bit more complex. So you need to ask when, where, and under what circumstances. So what will happen in the rather near term is that we will be able to enable autonomy in certain cases. And in our case, we focus that on the highway use case as the first one, meaning we can actually let the car drive for you when you're on a highway. And it's in certain places because we need to actually make sure those highways are suitable for autonomous driving. So we will release this kind of in a per region or per geography rollout. In order to make sure we have actually verified it's safe. It will always also be under certain conditions because the sensors that the car has, that it's basically the eyes of the car, it looks around in all directions. They have some stages of weather and other things around them when they work really well and others that are more challenging. So in the early days, some types of conditions will not be able to be serviced with autonomy. For instance, if there's a snowstorm, the sensors may not work well enough to actually be safe, and then we will not enable the service. So you will see actually different places will allow it, different places will be suitable, and different conditions will be suitable. But that will keep growing. So basically growing from highways to other scenarios, from certain places in the world to others. And that may depend on the actual roads, but it can also depend on the legislation. And then we will keep improving the system so it works under more and more conditions. And I think it's probably a quite long time before we see this car that doesn't even have a steering wheel or any controls. Because that means it can drive on every single dirt road in every single part of the world. That's quite far out, but we will see a lot more cases where we can actually help. And the good thing is that starting on highways, for instance, it's a place where people spend a lot of time. So it's actually quite good value for you as a user if you don't have to sit and drive in the traffic jam on your way to work every day.
But you could geofence those highways to enable, say, self-driving capabilities.
Exactly. And that means you get some value where you can actually do something else, work or relax or whatever you want to do on your way to work. But still, it's a containable use case where we can make sure it's safe.
Always when we talk about autonomous driving, we talk about those cases, those 5% of the unexpected where collisions and deadly collisions could be the outcome. And we increasingly talk about sort of the ethical decisions that AI have to take. In your company, how do you develop processes where you can ensure that the decision of AI is based on ethical principles? Because that will be increasingly important in all kinds of operations and companies.
Yeah, I think the AI is not ethical as such, and I actually get this question quite a lot as well. I think the way we look at it is we design systems to avoid things. We're not trying to teach them to select one type of person over the other or anything like that. The beauty of automation is that you can actually add functions that try to avoid the entire situation. So if you see quite far ahead and you see in all directions, actually better than a human being, that means you can start kind of to try to avoid even getting into a potentially dangerous situation. And that is really where we help out in avoiding. And I mean, in the case where there's a potential accident, an autonomous car, I think very much as a human being, you hit the brakes and you try to avoid to hit something, or you steer away from where there's potential danger. But the potential in our systems is that we can actually identify those possible dangers. We can learn from other situations that became dangerous and try to much earlier do some tactical planning and say change lanes to try to avoid even getting near that situation.
To conclude, Ejed, I'd like to pick your brain a little bit and see to understand what areas you think are exciting, being a leader who is involved in transforming kind of part of a traditional business. If you had 3 months of time that could add to your schedule, to your life, your regular work wouldn't be affected, you could just add those 3 months. What would you do? What capabilities would you develop? What kind of learning would you be involved in? What would you explore further?
Oh, that's a good question. I think actually one of the real beauties, and we were talking about this the other day, of the whole transformation we're in, when we went from these kind of long-term years of planning to this quickly developing loop, is actually that all of us have to much more be curious about what's going on around us. And I normally tell people I have the dream job, so I'm not sure I would want to do something else, even for 3 months. But I think all of us need to have learning as a very active part of what we do. And I'm super curious. I think one of the best things that happened in the world in my life is the amount of interesting podcasts that are around. So basically, I listen to a lot of those. I read a lot. And probably if I had 3 more months, I might do more of that.
What's your favorite topic to learn more about? Because it doesn't have, I didn't mean that you're leaving Senzak. I mean, you're just deepening some kind of interest or focus area.
Well, obviously, I'm super interested in everything that's like involving autonomous cars, AI, and things like that. So I do quite a lot of listening and reading in those spaces. And there are quite a lot of interesting stuff going on there. Also, I think the level of what's being produced in terms of podcasts is quite high there. It's kind of a nerdy community, and they have kind of a certain requirement of what's being produced. So I think that's interesting. But I think it's also very interesting to kind of follow what's happening in the world in general. Everything from, I'm interested in everything from politics to kind of where users are spending their time. And I think in the end, what happens in different industries impacts each other much more now than it used to be like maybe 20 years ago. So user behavior is not contained to a car. You expect the same level of good shopping experience on the internet. If you buy a very big investment like a car, it should be definitely not worse than when you buy clothes or food or something online. So every experience you have as a user spills over on other industries. So I try to kind of be a bit interested in the world completely around us and not only be nerdy about the autonomous driving.
That's such great advice, to be really, really passionate about a good user experiences, whether they're business to business or business to consumer. What's sticky? Why do you love something? What is it that this service is doing, and why do I keep returning? That's something that we all should be curious about, searching for excellence in that area. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Ajad, for joining us today and for letting us understand more of how Zenseact is working and what your passion is.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
And you'll have the opportunity of meeting Ajad live, and you can use the chat for your questions, so keep them coming. But first, we'll do a few reflections with Fredrik Brun. Welcome back.
Thank you.
What are your initial reflections after listening to Ajad Andersson of Zenseact?
First of all, I really enjoyed this talk you had. It was quite encouraging to see their vision and to hear about it. I think there are a number of aspects, actually. There is a lot of things that can be said here, but a few things that come to my mind. And the first one we already touched upon before, that's the legal framework. Because there will always be corner cases where the self-driving car does not work. And as you know, a lot of people are still afraid of flying, even though it's scientifically proved that it's better to fly on autopilot than having a pilot. But a lot of humans still would like to have that pilot in cockpit when you fly to the Canary Islands or somewhere. And I think we're going to see the same thing here. Even though we are technically able to have self-driving cars, the corner cases will make people a little bit afraid of using that functionality. So it will take a lot of time before it will make a big impact. And that goes back to two things: the legal framework and the mentality, the societal structure. How do we communicate with each other regarding autonomous systems?
And what needs to be clarified, both in terms of legal and communication?
There are many aspects, two technical aspects that I thought about in this talk. The first one being cybersecurity. So I have an IT background myself, and for the heck of it, I hacked my own car, my private car. So there is a severe cybersecurity issue with this autonomous car industry and autonomous systems overall, because they tend to be connected. And when you have connected systems, they can be hacked. So we really need to study advanced cybersecurity. How do we make sure that we don't have cybersecurity terrorism? And there is another aspect as well. I think that a lot of people have forgotten what it was like in the 60s and 70s, where we have electromagnetic interference and you had bad TV, etc. We are going to see the same thing with modern electronics. We are going to see electromagnetic terrorism. And this you already see in the so-called Havana syndrome, where U.S. State Department officials have been subjected to microwave radiation. The same kind of radiation can actually be used to remotely shut down autonomous systems.
And this is not just in the areas of autonomous driving in cars. This is in all industrial applications.
Yes.
This is a threat within an industrial compound or a factory, for example.
And what's interesting is that a lot of the discussions I see really discusses the technical aspects. but not really these issues. And I think it's important that we are not naive. It's fairly easy to do this kind of things, and it will happen. And another aspect as well is the impact of climate change on algorithms. Just look at the United States, the West Coast, the South, and the East Coast for the last 3 weeks. You have smoke from fires, you have flooding in minutes, you have destroyed roads, road signs are gone. So the environment in which the self-driving car has to work is changing in minutes. And I have a big question if the algorithms can cope with these rapid changes the way they are being designed now. I think we are going to see that the self-driving cars have to fall back on manual mode in many cases for
That's an interesting aspect. I never thought about that one. Mm.
Yeah.
Urged highlights also that automation requires predictability, but AI is inherently unpredictable. How do we overcome that? Contradiction.
Yeah, this is super interesting. So it's really difficult for people today to explain how the neural network layers work. So we can train them, we can show that they are working, but we really don't know exactly why. So as you said, it's a mismatch between predictability and AI. So the way to overcome that is to have multiple algorithms that reason, and then they come to the same conclusion. And then with a high degree of certainty, you can say that this is for a fact something. So you have to overcome that discrepancy by clever engineering.
She also highlights Zenseact's processes and ways of working as key success factors. Yeah. They're constantly sort of improving and working with that. Yeah. Any reflections, any things that you learned?
I was very happy to hear about that. So coming from a startup industry, having worked in Silicon Valley for a while, I'll see a lot of that mentality in Zenseact. And I think it's really crucial, as Urged is saying, to keep the software separate from the hardware, because we have such a long history in Sweden of working with hardware. But this going forward is mostly about software. And I think they've done it beautifully by separating this very quickly, very elaborate. It's two distinct different organizations, and they work fast with software. Mm. And I think that's very important. If you're going to fail fast.
Yeah, because the model of letting a startup like Zenseact develop core competencies and applications for an incumbent like Volvo Cars, that's a recipe we're seeing more of. Yeah. What is your sort of advice to more traditional companies that want to act and think like a startup and collaborate with, or not startup, but with a software company?
So I think you need to do what Zenseact has done. You need to go from controlling everything with your regular processes to really let go. You have to treat it as a separate child altogether. And that's very difficult in my experience to see companies let go of something. But you need to do that. You need to let these organizations work separately. They need to be fast. Mm. And the traditional companies are not fast.
But what can they do to model that and get a little bit more speedy?
So they need to have innovation managers. They need to have digital transformation leaders in their company. And they need to have a high degree of self-decision. And they need to be able to say that this is what we will do. We are going to do this software development. We will do it in 6 months. No one will believe them. And they will do it in 6 months.
Clear goals, autonomous teams, yeah. High degree of freedom and flexibility, I hear you say.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And the processes is different. So you need to have two separate sets of processes. It might even be that you need two separate ISO certifications, one for one thing and one for the other. You really need to make a clear distinction.
Great advice. Thanks, Fredrik.
You're welcome.
It is time to meet Urged live and see if she can help you elaborate on some of the questions that you're having. Hi, Urged.
Hey.
Hey. So we have questions from our participants. One is... I'll just take a few of them, and then I know I have some help getting them coming. This is a broader one. If access to data is key in determining business success, then those companies that have access to the most data will be the most successful. So market share becomes the ultimate competitive advantage. What does that do to competition and innovation?
That's a very interesting topic, I think. It's true, of course, if you have a widespread and if you have a strong market share, you get an immediate advantage. But you can also make some smart choices. And I'm personally really happy with the choice that Volvo Cars made. Now, their market share is not the biggest. There are bigger car manufacturers in terms of volume, but what they decided to do is to actually standardize hardware, which means the data collection comes from each and every one of their cars. So taking some decisions that actually maximize your data collection can also help. And that kind of goes against the traditional model of making business through options in the car industry, but it helps a lot in the data collection dimension. But then, of course, partnerships is also a key strategy. So when you and I were chatting last time, we talked a little bit about working with partners. And I think, for instance, when I was working with Volvo Cars, we were collaborating with Google, which allowed us to have an assistant in the car, which actually relied on the data that comes from all the phones in the world. So with the right partners, you can also extend your reach. So I think those are maybe two important factors.
Okay. There are some questions also in the chat about safety, about communicating safety. Professor Morris Binham's question is, do we really trust AI when it comes to safety, and what can be done today and what are things for the future? That's a broader one, but I think the question has, if you could talk about what do we know about how much our consumers trust AI, for example, in the case of autonomous driving. Do you have those kind of studies?
I don't have so much recent data on this. Actually, when we have done some qualitative studies, we believe that probably over-trust is as big an issue as not trusting. So what we've seen actually running tests with users is that you quite quickly get comfortable, and it's not so much that you don't trust the system. There will be, of course, be people like that around as well. But it's actually over-trusting the system being capable of more than it can actually do is maybe our greatest safety concern, which leads to being very important to communicate when you are in command as a driver versus when the system is in command.
Okay, it's the other way around. I know I have the questions coming, so we'll take another one. Will people ever give up driving? My partner won't even give up her manual gearbox. What do we know about our user studies on preferences for autonomous versus manual cars?
Yeah, I think this is a question we debate a lot in the industry. I think driving are so many things. I mean, one of them is I want to get from home to work as quickly as possible. And in many cases, that means a quite uncomfortable commute in congested traffic. That driving, I don't think anybody thoroughly enjoys that much. I think people will be quite happy to give up those kind of situations. But then we have a spectrum that's everything from that to people taking care of classic cars and driving them for pleasure in nice roads, or people who are sporting driving on different courses and so on. Probably those kinds of driving will be around for a long time, but the practical driving that solves our transport, I think we will give up as soon as there's a better alternative.
We have more questions coming. Trust is something which is also connected to human social values. Are there trends or research in this direction too that you can point us to?
I don't have any good references up my sleeve here, but we work a lot with Volvo Cars, and Volvo Cars has a long tradition actually of working with kind of behavioral scientists looking into the behavior of people. And we actually run quite a lot of research together with them to figure out the behavioral aspects. And I think those are very important. And of course, trust is a fundament in there.
So I'm also curious back to the way you work, and you talk about speed and speed being sort of both a goal and a differentiator. Can you talk a little bit about your leadership and what kind of leadership fosters speed and then encourages also sort of risk taking and experimentation?
Yeah, I think one of the big aspects, if you want to focus on speed and flow in your development, it's not very favorable to have a rigid hierarchy of decisions, because that tends to add a lot of lead time into making decisions. So what we try to do is to work a lot on sharing where we're going and unifying our direction. So that as a leader, it becomes much more important to actually be able to have good conversations with people about where we think we're going, what's going on in the world around us, what's our strategic direction, and then really rely on the teams to take the decisions in their everyday life that's pointing in that direction. And that's a way to create speed in the system. And we have, quite a few teams that have dependencies with each other. So having an alignment is quite important. And of course, continuously keeping that alignment also means we need to discuss, now we did this, are we aligned on that? Are we moving in the right direction? How do we know that we're progressing towards our goals and so on? So that's a lot of the focus in the leadership rather than traditional hierarchy of decisions.
You have a long experience from different industrial organizations. What would you say you were doing most differently today in your role as a leader and CEO compared to, say, 5 years ago?
I think 5 years ago, we were very much on this journey too. So I think the fun part is that this speed and working towards a very unknown road to autonomous driving is we need to learn, all of us. So there's, I think, an increasing amount of retrospecting going on, not just with the development teams, but also with us as a leadership. We look at, we did this, was it right? So kind of allowing experimentation to be a part of the leadership as well as a part of the development process.
It sounds like a lot of fun.
Continue that journey.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it sounds like a lot of fun.
It is.
Yeah, we have one more question from our audience. What do you see as key success factors for collaboration between industry and research? Maybe that we also have a lot of academia with us today, and PhD students are in the audience.
Yes. And I think this is really exciting. And we have, in our company, we have quite a few PhD students, actually. So in our area, we do this kind of industrial PhD setup. So you're actually hosted in a company. And the idea is, of course, to make a strong connection between what goes on in our regular development and the more forward-looking research. And I think autonomous driving is perfect for this, because we really need a lot of research to sort out some of the future problems. I think one key is to have that regular conversation means that the researchers know what the big problems are. They, of course, go looking for the solutions, but they know what the real key problems that need a solution are all the time. And the other way around, the people developing are all the time more aware of what's going on in the research. So what kind of maturity level different new things are reaching, and when might it be mature for experimentation in a more production-like setup.
In what areas would you like to see increased research or more research? Any any requests to our audience?
Well, I think obviously the whole AI and machine learning field is still a rather new one to be used at the scale we are right now. So we really enjoy that research going forward. We do some research now on edge and basically looking at how we might use the edge of the communication infrastructure in the future, and how the cars are a part of the edge. So that's an area where we put some effort right now. I think it's very interesting. I mean, considering we will have quite powerful servers driving around in all our cars, how do we actually make use of those in the best way in the future? So those are a couple of areas. There are many more, but those are a couple that we focus a lot on right now.
Thanks. We'll have another one from our audience here. In your opinion, is it applied or basic research that drives innovation? That's a big one.
Wow. I'm not sure I'm actually the best to answer that. But I mean, I think the research system as it's constructed relies on basic research to happen. I mean, that's a kind of a part of also the whole education system that feeds kind of the progress of knowledge. Of course, applied research is maybe more what we have close to us, as it has a shorter path to come into production. But I think they don't really work in isolation from each other. So probably both are important, but in different ways.
One more. How will self-driving cars lead to a more sustainable future? Can you explain that correlation?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, a part of what we do is to aim to save those lives that are injured or killed in traffic, which is in itself a sustainability goal. So that is maybe our biggest contribution. We also believe in a quite different riding pattern versus driving. So and we usually talk about analogy when you're riding in a taxi driven by somebody. You prefer that to be a very smooth ride when you're a passenger. And we believe the same is true for autonomous when you're riding and the car is driving. So probably we will have a driving style that's more favorable to use less energy, because we have less acceleration, deceleration, and so on. Right now, we're actually looking into how to measure that in a good way. So we actually get some hard facts and data on that as well. But those are a couple of aspects. But I think important for us, of course, is the saving lives part of this.
Of course. Thanks so much, Gerd Andersson, for joining Industry Day and being with us today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
So it is time for a break. Maybe you are joining us in a time zone where it's time for an after-dinner drink here in Västerås in Sweden. It is definitely 100% focused on coffee. See you back in about 10 minutes, 10:40. It's great to have you back. Our third keynote speaker is Head of Technology and Industry in the US for Ericsson. He will share how Ericsson works with industry applications for 5G, and he will give examples of how Ericsson develops and tests new use cases on a real 5G platform. Here is Jan Söderström.
Hello everyone, I'm Jan Söderström. I'm head of the Advanced Technology and Industries US. I'm reporting to Ericsson's group CTO, Erik Ekudden. And I've been asked by the team here to present today about 5G and what 5G enables for use cases and innovation, and how we at Ericsson work with the tech ecosystem and enterprise ecosystem to drive innovation. I work in San Francisco, or outside San Francisco in Silicon Valley. I will share a little bit about how we work with collaborations with tech partners there. So 5G has been around for about 2 years. Maybe you haven't seen so much about it, but you will find some live networks in downtown areas. For example, Stockholm, Telia has a live network in Stockholm. But globally, this is happening everywhere. So these are the last statistics we have for the moment, 176 live networks worldwide. Ericsson is live with 94 out of these. It's in 45 countries, 25% population coverage by the end of this year. 54% of traffic in Korea is on 5G, etc., etc. So it is really something that is happening, and I'm sure all of you will experience both as consumer, but maybe even more in your roles as professionals driving industry transformation. Ericsson comes out with the mobility report every year, or sometimes even twice a year. This is the latest statistics worldwide for the different cellular technologies. And you see the 5G in orange there, growing very, very fast. Actually, the 5G is growing faster from its start than 4G did, and which in itself was faster than 3G. So it seems that for every generation of new mobile technology, the uptake is faster and faster. So by 2026, 3.5 billion subscribers will be connected. This slide shows primarily the consumer side of things. I know this seminar is more about industry, and I have some slides about that here as well. So on the left here you see the potential in different industries for growth, and in this case measured as the potential for mobile operators to gain additional value in these sectors. But that of course means that there is a tremendous need for digitization in 4G for industries in these sectors. So it's a growth industry. And on the right hand side you see for just factories how wireless connection to different sensors and cameras and actuators are taking over completely. And it's not that they just replace existing wires. It is many, many more connections that are being established, and more measurement points, surveillance points, etc. So what we have today of digital infrastructure in the factories will be dwarfed by the new connections we will get using wireless in the industry. I think the next slide here show, and I hope you can see the animations here. We're trying to run some videos here. What Ericsson ourselves are doing, dog fooding or drinking our champagne for having 5G as a base layer in factories. Automated manufacturing, much more efficient production, increased quality, and some of the use cases you see here. We have 5G connected drones for inventory counting. We have trucks or AGVs going around. We have surveillance cameras. We have many other things, AR used for training, VR used for training, remote assistance using augmented reality. Ericsson has a very advanced factory in Louisville, Texas, that has many of these use cases implemented, but we also have other factories worldwide that are implementing 5G for more efficient production. And factories is only one area. Many industries are digitizing: ports, airports, mines. Ericsson has been engaged with these kind of verticals and companies in Germany, in Sweden, in US, in Asia, to show different values of use cases doing this. So this is now being unleashed by the fact that these networks are being rolled out. I think it's one thing that is important to say about 5G is that it's not only more gigabits per second or megabits per second, it's also much more reliable. You can depend on a 5G network as you depend on a wire. You have much lower latency down in the millisecond range. You can have much shorter control loops. So there's much more things that you can do with the newest technology than you maybe haven't expected before. So, and this slide says about this. So it must be industry-grade solution. It must have high level of data security. Configuration and maintenance must be doable over this network. Things that are typically not possible in a Wi-Fi network. Much of different devices connected. It must be scalable, implementable, so you can have the same solution in different factories around the world. So it's a global solution that actually must work across better geographies, and must support investment life cycles to make it economical to implement this. So this is the expectation of 5G, and the fundamentals of this technology is to deliver this. So as we now see the use cases coming about and developed with partners, we can showcase more and more of these capabilities and hope to see much more, including working with companies here in this audience as well. So that was my first half of my presentation, showing, okay, 5G is happening. 5G delivers new value that we didn't have before. It's higher bandwidth, it's higher shorter latency, it's more reliable, inbuilt security, and it enables to transform industries to put critical infrastructure on a 5G network, either a public network on the operator's wide area network, or in a private 5G network in a factory or in a particular area. So, but my day job really is to work in Silicon Valley with what we call Ericsson D15, which is our 5G connected lab for innovation in Santa Clara, to find these partners that wants to have new use cases and enable new use cases, and we work with them to design, to dare to do this innovation, to design the use case and the test cases, and to deliver the solutions when it's all tested for a commercial rollout. So this is what we call D15, and the name D15 actually comes from our founder. Silicon Valley companies love their founder stories. They talk about the Hewlett-Packard garage, they talk about Facebook's dorm room in Harvard, they talk about Apple's garage, etc. So our marketeers realized Ericsson must also talk about our founder story, and they had to dig deep in the years, of course, going back to 1876 and see where did Lars Magnus start his business. It turned out he borrowed 300 kronor from his mother-in-law, and he rented a kitchen in Drottninggatan 15 to do his first experiments, and with two colleagues to, I guess, coil copper cables for a phone or something like that. So when people ask me where is Ericsson startup garage, I tell them, well, Ericsson has been doing this since before there were cars even, so we didn't have a garage, we had a kitchen. But this story resonates really well with the enterprise and tech ecosystem in Silicon Valley, and we are very proud to develop this concept together with them. And why Silicon Valley? Well, you probably know, but this is where all of this investment capital sits, where all these startups are created, much around Stanford and Berkeley universities, and combined with sort of the early successor from PayPal, etc., there's been created a fantastic venture capital industry that enables more and more companies to come up. And of course, many of these are now huge multi-billion-dollar companies, Google, Tesla, etc. So we work with most of these, both the big ones and the smaller ones, and to develop new solutions. Of course, it's a great benefit of being in close vicinity, so you can meet, have events, discuss, being in the same time zone. Right now during COVID, it's of course only the same time zone that is really useful, but we're so looking forward to come back into physical meetings now and having more demos on site. So that's the lab we have in Silicon Valley. We have some 200-300 people in this site, and some of them are working with this innovation D15 concept with me then. And our story in Silicon Valley is not brand new. We have been there actually since 1997, I think. But I came there in 2008 to build up a research department working with Stanford and Berkeley and Carnegie Mellon, and also building up a research team to work with these. But we're adding more and more capabilities. In 2009, the smartphones started to penetrate, 4G smartphones started to penetrate the market, and it became apparent that they were not optimized for 4G networks, or for mobile networks at all. They were loading the network with lots of signaling traffic. They were draining the batteries of the phones, etc. So we had to teach them how to use, how to design their applications and the phones to work well on a mobile network. So we set up what's called the Smartphone Lab, where it was a free service for these companies to come and test. Well, quite soon after that, we realized we can do more than just have them test. We can actually develop new solutions if we expose some of our technologies. So Wi-Fi calling from laptops, from smart watches, from smart speakers became our sort of first exposure project, where we exposed network functionality so they could include some of that in their designs, in their innovations. So that was a great learning for us. Before the 5G was standardized, we had some pre-standard work go from Ericsson Research, 5G for Industries, with manufacturing, etc. And then in 2019, we decided to consolidate all of this into a much more coherent design setup with a cloud-based lab. We called it D15, and we work with all of these enterprises, all of these operators, startups, cloud players, industries, device makers, app developers. And when you look into what kind of devices are now to run on this network, it's everything from smartphones to smart grid automation to advanced vehicles to drones, fleet management, AR, VR glasses, AR glasses, etc. And when we look into the revenue potential, I show another version of this picture before, but the $1,500 billion of additional growth that we can see in these different verticals. That's of course a business rationale for Ericsson to invest in labs like this and enable the ecosystem to do more, so we can sell more gear and develop new solutions. So that's the rationale, and we have been on it for quite a bit. I'm finishing off by just showing one example on how we work. In this case, it's a consumer use case, but it's still educational, I think, to understand how we work also with industrial use cases. So in this case, it's virtual reality. Virtual reality requires big goggles, of course, but also a lot of compute to actually render the picture well. When you move your head, the computer has to generate a picture of where you're looking and send it back to you. And in our kids' computers, they have a cable from an advanced gaming computer up to the headset, etc. This is quite expensive and it's not mobile, etc. Another version is to carry a backpack with a big computer on your back. We have seen some of that. But together with Qualcomm and NVIDIA, we tried to figure out what if we do this with more lightweight glasses and without the backpack on your back and without a cable. We use 5G low latency network and we move the picture rendering to the edge, to a cloud setup further away from the user, but with a low latency connection enough so as soon as I move my head, the information goes back over the 5G network back to the edge data center. It generates the picture, renders the picture and sends it back over the 5G network to the user. So he gets it within, like say, 20 milliseconds. If it's slower, much slower than that, you will become dizzy and you will get seasick. So this has been great work going. Qualcomm has the chipset and some of the codecs. NVIDIA has the edge service, and Ericsson has the 5G network. So this, I think, VR is a key use case coming up. And next one, which we are anticipating coming soon, there's a lot of hush around that, is augmented reality glasses. We do believe that many of the big players will come out with AR glasses for use. And you can imagine with a see-through glass where you actually get overlaid pictures on a lightweight glass, that could really become something that could be used by everybody. So that same principle will hold there as well. You cannot have all that computing in your glasses. It has to be on the edge. So this solution that we now use for VR, we anticipate will be used for AR as well. So just finalizing with a demo or proof of concept we did this summer, showing that also that for complete use cases you really can sometimes need a lot of players. Here was AT&T and Warner Brothers, Ericsson, Qualcomm, Dreamscape, and Beaver. Warner Brothers owns the Harry Potter content, and we developed a full VR experience. You see it on the right here, where the user have these VR glasses. He is in a complete studio with haptic feedback in the floors, with the fans and water spraying and everything, and sound, really creating a very unique experience where people actually think they are in the world. And you see on the left, you see what kind of world he is in. Super cool. This, I think, of course, can be used in industrial settings as well as we get to training, etc. And as I said, with AR, even more so. But this was just a glimpse on how we work with partners in Silicon Valley, how we use our knowledge and our assets. We put up a lab so people can test. They come in with their ideas. We jointly work to develop this and optimize this so it actually makes sense and gets the right technical criteria. We understand the business model for these new use cases, and we jointly push the envelope for what can be done on 5G networks. So this model and this capability, I'm a firm believer that will penetrate into all of the industry sectors. Many of you are engaged in your own sector, and there's so much more to be done. I'm very excited about this opportunity. I'm having the best time of my career doing this work, and I look forward to taking discussions with you later on in this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jan. We'll have time for questions with Jan, but first a few reflections from you, Fredrik Brun. So here we have, or soon we will have, reliable wireless infrastructure. Can we then expect AI to be applied everywhere?
Now that's a really interesting question, and again, this was a very interesting presentation. And I think that 5G is being presented as a one solution for everything to rule them all. And that's really not the case. It's one of those solutions that enables more reliable networking. However, usually wireless systems comes together with batteries or other technologies, and those are not very reliable. So you're really moving the reliability issue around in the system. That's one aspect. The other aspect that is not typically discussed is that with 5G we go up in frequency, and when you go up in higher frequencies you're more susceptible to rain and electromagnetic disturbances, for instance. So even though there are some very good real-time properties of 5G, 5G is also more sensitive to electromagnetic radiation, for instance, than compared to previous systems. And this causes a problem in an industrial setup because you have many industrial applications like welding, for instance, and other applications that generate a lot of electromagnetic noise. And it's very difficult to use 5G in those environments. So in that case, you need to use wires like you did before. In many cases also you need to have a permanent power connection. And if you have a permanent power connection, you might as well have a cable for the data. So 5G will make a tremendous impact, but it's not one thing that will rule them all.
What will be the major impact, in your opinion, of 5G in the short term and then in the long term?
I think in the short term, the real-time properties of 5G will make a big impact. The fact that you can do time slicing, that you can have your own base station in your factory, and you can have a guaranteed bandwidth, for instance. That means that you can automate the systems in a whole different way.
Because it's predictable in another way.
It's more predictable, so you can have different architectures that we cannot have with 4G or 3G, for instance. So that's, I think, the immediate application of it. But in long term, you have connected cars, you have connected industry, you have almost connected everything. And that can be enabled through 5G. However, even in this question, as we discussed earlier, we need to address the question on cybersecurity. Because the more things we connect, the more likely it is that you will have breaches in the systems.
The more vulnerable we are. Mm-hmm. So, what would you like to test in Ericsson's 5G lab that Jan described that they have in Silicon Valley?
So what,
just to understand,
yeah.
what do we want to test here?
So for me as a researcher and doing applied AI in industry, it's all about reliability and cybersecurity. So what I'm interested in is really testing the protocols, testing the different frequencies in terms of reliability in real application, where the environment is really, really bad, because that's what you will see, especially in industry, really bad environments.
We'll get live to Jan now and have a few questions. And that was all from you. Thank you so much for being my sidekick and for all your insightful comments and reflections.
Thank you.
So let's see if Jan is with us live from Silicon Valley. It's brutally early for you. Thanks so much for joining us live, and thanks so much for that talk, Jan. We have questions from our audience. They're a little bit mixed, so I'd like to honor those who've used the chat to take questions, and then I'll mix them a bit. So the first one is from Zenipi Zatka. He's a PhD student here at Mälardalen Högskola. Did you manage to implement a converged network of TSN and 5G in a real-world scenario? TSN, time-sensitive network.
Yes, we are. I mean, time-sensitive networks are critical. Some of it is not yet standardized, so we're coming out in upcoming releases. But for example, we have a project together with an industrial Rockwells in US, where we are able to run industrial protocols over the 5G networks, also using pre-standard features. So those kind of innovations and those kind of next steps are critical for allowing, like, instead of having cables, and particularly if you have existing all-time protocols in that we use on the wires, if you want to cut the wires and just put it onto the 5G network, you need to have control over those of that time sensitivity about bounded latency and so on. So that's a very good question, but we'll come
because I guess the question is about, does it increase reliability?
Well, it depends on what you mean with reliability. In this case, it's a question about can you have low latency application running on it? And then the question is on a wireless network. That has not been possible at all before. So it has only been wires. So I don't think you switch from wires to a 5G network. You switch when you know it's equally good reliability. And that's what we're getting to.
We have a question from Alexander Gogolev. How does the industrial 5G R&D share compare to common end user 5G share of R&D in Ericsson? What's your focus here, basically?
We have 4 business areas within Ericsson. 3 of them are working with more the consumer technologies, and the 4th one, technology and emerging business, are set up to develop the new areas of industrial applications in different verticals. Also, the other business areas are pitching in to solve these use cases, but maybe that gives a little bit of a hint on how much we focus on new applications. When we look into the business potential of adding other users to the networks rather than only smartphones and with SIM cards, there is a potential for the operators only to add another 40% of revenue if and when they can address like robots or cars or VR glasses, etc. So it's a great potential, and it's starting to pick up now.
I have a few more questions coming up here. So when will 5G be rolled out so it's available in our everyday lives?
Yeah, I had some of that in my presentation here in Sweden. It is available downtown areas in major cities. I don't have the coverage map for Sweden in my head, so I don't know exactly when it's going to be rolled out. And but by 2025, I mean, I can talk about US. In US, half of the population will be onboarded to 5G by 2025.
In 4 years' time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what do you think will be the main applications in 4 years' time?
The motivation for carriers to roll it out is currently just to provide better internet connection, actually. But so that is paying off for the investment itself. But then comes the new applications, and that's an important question. If I had the full answer, I would be an investor and tell you what it's going to be. But I think XR, virtual reality, and augmented reality is something that is we're really seeing traction around, both for consumers and for training and enterprises, etc. So that's one area, but cool. There are many more.
Mm-hmm. So we have one more. Do you see risks associated with upgrades of control systems and 4G to 5G upgrades?
I'm not sure exactly what kind of risks of the control system they ask for here. 5G compared to 4G security was built in from the design, starting from the scratch. So even though you have more attack surfaces with 5G, given that there are so many more connections and possibilities to attack surfaces they can connect to, it's also much more built-in security and a trusted system. So our ambition is to keep this as trusted as we have had it, and even better, right? But this is not only the 5G network per se, it's the endpoints, it's the internet aspect, and there are many aspects that need to work together here. So I don't think the 4G to 5G per se is a risk step. It's just that we need to keep track all the things connected to it.
Thank you, John, and thank you for joining us at Industry Day.
Thank you so much.
So now I have a few guests in the studio. When we're going to have a discussion on the theme of going from innovation to transformation. So you'll meet my wonderful industry representatives. So just to, instead of doing a traditional presentation of you, can you just give me an idea where your focus is in September 2021? Jenny, would you like to start? What is on top of your agenda at Hitachi ABB Power Grids?
Well, it's for sure about enabling the journey towards a sustainable future. And in our case, as a company working with transmission and distribution and electrification, we are really one of the suppliers with a broad portfolio to enable that. And when it comes to electrification, that is really a key enabler. Now in the transition to lower CO2 emissions, take transportation sector, for example. And of course, several really exciting examples from the industry as well, where several industry companies phase out fossil fuels and replace with electricity, clean electricity, or hydrogen in order to do their journey. And that's our focus, to really be close to our customers and partners.
It's a great area to be in right now.
Yeah,
and Jenny, what's your focus as CEO?
Yeah, I work as a country managing director. So for me, it's about working together with the management team, of course, and our 4,000 colleagues in Sweden. It's both about enabling and bringing out our technology, but also really being part of the ecosystem that we have. And the ecosystem that we have in Sweden is very strong since many years back, I would say. It's about large companies, small companies working together with the government, authorities, and academia to do the journey. And one thing that I can also mention is that this autumn is exciting for us because we will make a brand journey as well and become Hitachi Energy. So a bit more easy to say as well.
So it's really great to have you in this discussion about going from innovation to transformation. So thanks for being here today. Hampus, you're a software developer at AFRY or AFRY or OFRY or AFRY.
Yeah.
What kind of projects are you currently involved in?
Right now I'm working at a client which is one of the big fives, where I work with AI, big data, and also a lot of algorithmic approaches. And the focus for now is very software centric on text analysis from every country, like Chinese and Arabic and Swedish, and gaining more understanding and doing automation that way.
You're the kind of person everybody wants on their team. He's here, the software specialist. How do you deliver value, and how do you scale sort of your contribution?
Well, in a lot of places, people don't really work agile, which is a way where you iterate a lot very fast and you fail fast and then you move forward. Which is something I try to bring. And then also being very creative and going to the depth. So instead of just looking at the data, I try to look also at the domain, at like what am I trying to achieve, rather than just taking the tools I am given.
But scaling your impact by helping clients develop new ways of working, I think that's a great recipe.
Yeah, exactly.
And Elin, what's cooking at Siemens Sweden?
Well, I work for Siemens Digital Industries, so I work with digitalization of Swedish industry, of course. So what we're cooking right now is that we're making digital twins of production to be able to create faster production solutions and make them better. And we're also looking a lot into data and connecting the production and using data analytics in order to make it better.
If we go straight to the theme, what's most different in the way you work today compared to 3 years ago?
Well, I think 3 years ago, we were still talking a lot about technology. And don't get me wrong, it's still a lot about technology when you talk about digitalization. But today we're more talking about value. We're talking about use cases. We're trying to focus more on the actual needs of the customer. So I think we have shifted a little bit from being very technology centric to being more use case centric, actually.
And how does that change the way you work?
It changes in the way that we communicate with our customers. It changes in the way that we actually make our own production better. We focus a lot about on the business value that we think or that anybody wants to create. And then from there, we take it onwards and try to implement the technology instead of focusing on the technology from the get-go.
And you have a site here in Sweden, right?
Not for production, no. That's another Siemens that has that. So, most of our production is.
But you can relate a lot to production. I know that.
Definitely.
So, the theme is from innovation to transformation, and really how to speed that process up. And if we talk about what's needed to increase speed, if you want to start.
Well, I think that you need to start thinking about digital transformation as an actual transformation, which means it needs to permeate through the whole company if you want to really be successful at it. So you need to have, the people driving it needs to have a mandate to be able to drive it. They need to have a strategy that's also interlinked with the business strategy of the whole company. So it really becomes this transformation of the whole company. And then finally, you also need to make sure that, as Hampus mentioned, you need to be able to start small, fail fast, but at the same time, you should also look into having solutions that are scalable and that you are going to get the return of invest on if once successful.
So align your sort of production goals with company goals, create a way of working that enables to fail fast and experiment.
Yes.
And then what was the third one again?
Strategy. Make sure you have a strategy that is connected to your business strategy.
Cool. How much, Jenny, are these kind of focus areas familiar to you and Hitachi ABB?
Yeah, sure. I recognize several things. And I think that is a lot about the technology, but of course applying it at the user cases. And for us, I think it's very important that we start with also the existing technology. And then we need to ramp up the pace also on how we implement new technology. But really accept that we need also the technology that we already have. And there I think that we in Sweden can be a bit faster in that area. If I take, for instance, electrification as an example, we have now a really strong need to both strengthen the capacity and the power quality in the Swedish grids in order to supply with the electricity that the industry needs. And here we have existing technology that we do not yet test enough, I would say. And we have possibilities to make the grid even smarter and also optimize together with the customers that want to connect to the grid and have sort of a systematic approach and understanding to this layer and this interface. And there I think we can really speed up and be braver to test technology.
And why don't we look at existing infrastructure and existing technology to a higher extent?
We do. I mean, there are several examples on how we collaborate in the ecosystem that I mentioned earlier. And one example that we have now is, for instance, working together with Ovako, H2 Green Steel, Nel, and also Volvo, where we apply existing technology, but in new areas. In this case, it's about hydrogen and, again, lowering CO2 emissions. But then we need also the political decisions and political support also from the government and also authorities so that we can do this fast enough, so that we have the environmental permits and that we have also the sort of the marketplaces where we can utilize the technology with the value, as I mentioned earlier, with the value.
Because maybe I'm looking more into understanding how we can also innovate on existing solutions and not just look for new solutions, because the impact would be greater if we also try to innovate on existing, right?
Absolutely. And there I think we can also do a lot with the understanding of the system. You talked about the user cases. And for me, it's also about the system understanding and the understanding between different sectors or different applications, because that's where we can also be more resource efficient and efficient going forward if we optimize. And I'm sure here we have a lot of competence in the AI area, etc., that needs to be applied on this so that we use and understand the system better than we have earlier.
And system thinking requires lots of different competences working together towards a common goal.
Yeah.
We'll get back to how that how we can enable that.
Sure.
Hampus, from your perspective, what could speed up the transition of traditional industries to a more software-oriented way of working?
I think what both says, like we really need someone with mandate that actually enforces something, unlike some things you see from time to time where a decision is taken but never enforced. So you say you're going to do this and then it doesn't happen. And then we need to see the system. So we really need to combine different types of domain knowledge together. So we can't just put the software team inside a traditional industry, but we need to combine them somehow so they work together and try to get the best out of both places. Because if I come and I get data and I try to do an AI solution, I might not be aware of the domain and I might do some bad decisions. I need to be almost in the same room as a domain expert and really know what am I going to work with and really have this tight process between the different parties.
What else?
I'm not sure.
But it means, from your perspective, again, that it's cross-functional ways of working.
Yeah.
It's translating sort of one person's perspective into something that makes sense to another domain expert.
Exactly.
Or
I think
it's a lot of getting the understanding about where we're going.
And having the right platform to work on. So like a big company like AFRU, we have from industry to processes to software to everything. And having that knowledge on one place is very good. And that is something companies should strive for. Either to bring in the knowledge or to have it.
I had expected your answer on how to speed up to be automate more.
Automate more, yes. That's one thing that people want to do with AI, but I don't think we're there yet. I think we should see AI more like an assistance. It's a way to speed up processes by removing manual touch points, like reduce the human interference needed, and then the human should be there and just get assistance and be able to take decisions based on what assistance it gets. And that's where AI really shines, actually.
Elin, how are you using AI at Siemens to speed up your processes, and what do you see as most challenging?
Well, I think, like many, we use AI, and I think that the reason why we started to look at AI is because I think a lot of production companies have reached something called the automation ceiling, where you basically have seen that traditional automation, it's not really a valid solution anymore. You need to produce smarter, and therefore we started to look into AI and actually any kind of data analytics. So we have many different solutions that we are using. If we look at our production, we use it a lot for predictive maintenance. We also have a case where we actually we used AI to ensure quality of a product, and that made us able to not needing to rebuild the production. We could instead use just the smartness of the machines or of AI instead. So you can really use AI in many different ways. And here again, you need to think about what is the business case and how you're going to actually create the value.
And if one would say, let's scale this up, what are the challenges?
Well, I think the challenges is that you need to think about something that is scalable. So you need to design something that you think, okay, this is something that can be reused. But also think about what is the actual architecture that you're going to put the solution on. And there you need to think about, okay, what's the scalability of this architecture? So next time you want to implement it, you don't have to, invent the wheel one more time. You actually can remove, one algorithm, put in a new algorithm in its place, and not needing to remove the full architecture.
I guess a key ingredient is from innovation to transformation is actually deploying AI to a larger extent and experimenting with processes.
Yes.
What is your advice? I mean, you've given us some advice, but what's your advice on really how to deploy AI in a more traditional
I think there is
industry setting?
a few key points. One of being the domain expertise I talked about previously. And then it's about thinking about the life cycle. Like, where is this AI going to work? You should be aware of, like, are they going to perhaps change the sensors and it's different data? It should be generalized towards this and work with that. Or you need to have a continuously updated system, which does not stop. Like, you put it in production and then you forget about it. That's not good. Another thing is that today we can understand the larger model, which we couldn't a few years ago. And I think that's a really important part in putting this into like traditional industries, is that we should be aware, like, why is it taking this decision? Because if it takes a decision that's bad, like they talked about previously,
being
the model,
AI model.
the AI models, the machine. If the decision is bad, we need to like understand, why did this happen? How can we stop it from happening? And that's something that we should put a lot of work into, so we really can like show this model not like a black box.
I'm also thinking maybe humans should think more about when not to apply AI, but rather sort of solve the problem with human thinking, or attack it with human thinking first.
Yeah, I agree. AI is not the solution for everything, really not. Sometimes it's better with a old school algorithm, or sometimes it's like just this simple system. But I also think that it's something people forget sometimes, that AI can solve problems that we're not aware it can solve. And then we think it can solve some problems it can't. So
we still need to experiment.
Exactly. And we still need to bring this knowledge out to especially smaller and mid-sized companies which don't have this knowledge. Like big companies like Siemens probably are aware of some capabilities, but not other people. There is a lot of things that are easily solved today that people are not aware of.
Jenny, you're really at the heart of industrial transformation. What could speed up the execution and roll-up of new infrastructure and technology in your teams and in your solutions? Because I guess you're also trying to do that, to be ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we have a lot of competence in-house, but for us, it's also very important to collaborate with others. I mean, we are a large company. It's very important for us to collaborate and bring in startups and scale-ups with really specific, great technology and innovation that we need and that we can leverage on and learn from each other. So that is one thing. And since 1.5 years back now, we have a power portal that we call it, where we sort of connect and have an interface so that we can welcome in startups and scale-ups, and also vice versa, so that we are attractive to them. And I think
is that sort of an open platform for collab? Is it?
Yeah, exactly. It's an open platform where we share our story and what we do, and then easy access and connection into our colleagues and people, so that they...
With open APIs or more of a collaborative?
No, this is more like a collaborative platform, just so we get to know each other and that we sort of find each other out in the ecosystem. And I think in order to speed up also, I mean, we need to be brave in sharing technology, brave in taking small steps and leverage from that, and really to dare to work together with others.
Let's stay there, being brave and being able to experiment, what that means in your respective roles. Jenny, how can you enable a more bold and brave organization in your role as a leader?
Yeah, I think when it comes to leadership and also employeeship, I think it's a lot about everyone being active and open and realizing and being proud. Yeah, this is what we stand for. This is our technology, but also really being open and actively search for others' ideas and competence. That's one sort of values that I discuss and talk about in our organization.
Are your leaders and colleagues measured on how bold they are?
Yes, we have values, absolutely. So innovation and speed are really core values that we work with.
Hampus, what examples do you have of you or your team being more bold and experimental?
I think it's allowing ourselves to take a lot of decisions that might not hold up, but when we prove it with MVPs, we can show that this is something that works, even though the management might not have trusted us. But
MVP,
they do allow
minimum
us.
viable product, is a sort of a mini example of an application.
It's like, yeah, exactly. It's just a small demo, so to say. Like this is the minimum viable product, and then you can scale that up.
You can sort of be bold and safe at the same time because you have something to prove your experiments with.
Exactly. And then like open technology, I think that's a really big thing. Open source is really what's connecting the industry with the academia inside machine learning and AI. And that's something that's very important to both contribute to and use, because that's how we can work together with the latest state-of-the-art research.
What about you, Ellen? How to first also hear about collaborations and partnerships. How can they enable you to be more speedy and bold?
Well, I think that Siemens is, it's an old company, and in the past we have been very, let's talk Siemens-centric, but now we talk more about ecosystems. And even though we do have a lot of capabilities when it comes to, for example, AI, we also recognize that it might not be the right solution every time to use Siemens solutions. It might be that we actually need to talk to Hampus, to really make the right solution for a customer. So I think when it comes to, being brave, for us, it's a lot about letting others in to our ecosystems and being more open also when it comes to technology.
So have you moved from talking to trying? You said we talk a lot about not being Siemens-centric, but have you also...
Yes, definitely, yes.
Give us an example.
Well, I think today, we have one example, which is industrial edge. And here we could really recognize from the beginning that this is a solution that would not work if we didn't have a full ecosystem. We are not large enough. We're a huge company, but we are still not large enough to really satisfy the demands of all the potential customers that we might have. And here we really are both inviting in partners, but also looking for new kinds of partners when it comes to both making applications, but also when it comes to the actual hardware we put the solution on. And in different ways, we're trying to understand, how can we all work together in order to really create this digital transformation.
What have you come to realize is sort of the recipe for success, one key ingredient here?
I think that's a big question, but I think one key part is that you need to be a bit bold, be a bit fearless, and also understand that you don't have to protect everything. Some things you can give away.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk more about sort of speeding up transformation. You've mentioned a lot of things. I'm pointing to you, Hampus, because you talked about immaturity also in terms of understanding what AI can do, that we have sometimes maybe too big of a hope, but we still don't really understand what the end goal is. What kind of sort of capabilities or competences do you need more of to succeed in delivering innovation, not just applying AI?
Yes, I think a lot is about what I talked about earlier, just combining different domain experts, because I know what AI is capable of, they don't, but I don't know what I can do with the AI always. It's like I wasn't aware that I could do this kind of anomaly detection of some kind of software part, because I didn't know we made it and they had anomalies even, but they do. And then I think companies need to be brave and start supporting open standards, because that's how we can really fire this innovation. When you have open standards, people can innovate privately and in the academia and on the companies, and they can work on the same platform instead of having like 200 different closed integrated circuits that you can't even experiment with, because it's a closed standard and you must buy the product before you can play around with the type of
Because that would
environment.
increase the opportunity for collaboration so much.
Yes, it would. It really would allow us to work together because we have the same kind of platform, or at least other can experiment with the platform.
What other competences could you see that you'll need more of, or capabilities?
I think that we really need people with multiple competences, not only trying to put the people together, but actually having the person that is the together. And I think that most companies should probably try to look into AI and get some expert to view their place, like we did when we started digitalizing everything. Like someone that knew how to digitalize a system would come out and look like, what can we do about this? Yes.
Jenny, what kind of need for new competences do you see and identify?
I recognize so much of what Hampus is already mentioning. So, I mean, there are, of course, several expert competences that we need, AI, digitalization, etc., being some of them. But then, again, I would like to raise also the competence of seeing the full system, of being able to understanding value chains that go together and connect, so that we can be resource efficient and that we can optimize different systems, regardless if it's the energy system or if it's a system at an industry customer site or an industry customer site with interface towards the electricity grid, etc. So the competence or groups put together that can leverage on that and build such systems.
System thinking and the ability to collaborate within that system between with someone who has a different competence or perspective than yourself.
Exactly.
And leaders who can manage those teams, I hear you say.
Yeah, sure.
What about you, Elin? Who are you looking for the most? Who would you pay? Who would you pay really good money to just come and join your team?
Well, we have a lot of openings right now, but I can only agree with the former speakers that, of course, it is a lot about these cross competences. So we need people that knows both about, the mechanics and the automation and programming of that, and we need people that understands both IT and production. Because we need to start bringing these worlds together. Digitalization is all about information, right? And you want to have the information where you need it and when you need it. And that means data. So in different ways, you need to be able to see what data exists and then put it together.
So I'm hearing you say open systems, open standards, system thinking and the ability to really get those cross-functional teams to work together, the ability to apply data and work in a data-driven way, and also work with solution thinking and solution architects. Those are some of the competences you are looking for, some of the things that could enable a more speedy transformation. What about technology? What technologies will you be focusing more on?
I think since we're talking a lot about data now, it's definitely a lot about, the technologies like 5G, like TSN and so on. But we're also moving a little bit on top of that. We're looking more into larger architectures that can really enable you to reuse the solutions that you have. So I think that's, the basis of it when you talk about technology. But again, not to be a broken record, but it's really about finding the use cases and finding also, the domain know-how to solve those use cases.
Do you have enough technology?
Oh, well, we have a lot of technology.
Jenny, new technologies?
Yeah, we need to provide what the industry, for instance, and the customers need. And from our perspective, it's a lot about power quality and electrification and enabling their journeys right now.
What would you say?
Well, I work with technology, so I tend to think the other way. I want to find like the old systems that we could enhance through technology. Like we could enhance some old system through AI and improve it, maybe reduce the energy needs.
So finally, to wrap up, this is Västerås, the capital of automation and industrial development in Sweden. If you could put up a huge billboard when everyone enters a message to everyone driving into Västerås about digital transformation and industrial transformation, what would that billboard read?
It starts with you, I would say, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that AI is not just for large companies. It's also for mid and small size companies.
It's
today.
also for you.
It's also for you. Yeah, you've improved it.
What about you, Jenny?
Yeah, we can. So let's be role models for the rest of the world.
That's a great message. Thank you so much for your sort of hands-on advice and for your personal reflections, and also for being so open about where you are. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to have another guest in the studio on Zoom, actually. She is a leader with collaboration, innovation and sustainability as her passions. Jenny Elfberg is currently the head of innovation management at Vinnova. Are you with us, Jenny? I know she is.
Hello.
Yes. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
How's your morning been? Have you been following us?
Yes, of course. What an amazing program.
Thank you. So what are your reflections so far, Jenny?
Well, yeah, I have a few things that I want to share. And an exciting announcement as well.
Yeah.
So, well, let's look back. I think you all can join me in this reflection over the day. Going back to Ericsson's D15. And that made me really think, technology development and change of behaviors have never been this fast. But most likely it will never be this slow. So we better deal with that. So that's one reflection from that. And also hearing from Jan, how they work to find that right concept for how to maximize the value of presence in Silicon Valley. I know that isn't easy by experience. And when you find that way where you collaborate, generously invite others to an open arena and experiment and learn together with others, I think that is a very good approach. Because I think also, look at the world, what's happening in the world right now. I think that open collaboration, collaborative exploration have never been more important than today. Mm-hmm. And then also the Vector Institute. I didn't know much about them before today. That's very, very interesting and impressive. Bringing great research to all sectors and to business success. I mean, that totally resonates with a person that came from industry just a year ago to Vinnova. I was particularly intrigued by this upskilling of professionals. I think we all, if you think about it, do we prioritize that sufficiently? And, in order to stay relevant, competitive, and deal with the wicked problems of today, we really, really need to work with that upskilling. And I guess these wicked problems are getting wickeder. Mm-hmm. More wicked. More wicked.
Thanks for those reflections. I know also you have an announcement to make, Jenny. We're very curious about what is it? Is it about something happening at lunch, or is it something bigger than that?
No, I'm not going to deal with your lunch. But I just wanted to also give some reflection on what Udgard said about traditional companies not being able to rewire for software sales. That was so insightful, and really, we don't really want to rewire and cause problems to existing business. I found that also super insightful. And also, being a little bit in love for collaboration. Maybe that is something you guys have felt today. I don't know. And Swedish industry is just like others, facing structural transformation driven by, the sustainability challenges, as well as the technology advancements. And the two projects, Nordic Intech and Electrification Talent Attraction, run by Automation Region are focusing on the sustainable production and electrification. And they are aiming at strengthening the ties between Sweden and Silicon Valley ecosystem by creating this open collaboration that has been mentioned over and over again today, falling a little bit in love. With that collaborations, we can actually utilize both the connections with the tech companies and networks in Silicon Valley to increase competence in Sweden, both technical and business related. And therefore, I am proud to announce that Automation Region, Energy Hub and Business Sweden San Francisco have now been entrusted with funding from Vinnova and from Business Sweden headquarters to attract world-leading startups and scale-ups from Silicon Valley to Västerås region in order to accelerate the development towards a more sustainable industry. I think this is so exciting. I'm looking forward to see the results. And that was the great announcement.
Thank you. We are all excited about that and about, of course, following the work and following the outcome of such an initiative. Thank you, Jenny. Great news.
Thank you for having me.
We're coming to the end of the show. I'm here with Mortis Benham. He is a professor working at Mälardalen University, and together with Professor Lucia Lobello, the University of Catania, they're the EFTA General Co-Chairs of the IEEE conference. How are you, Professor Benham?
I'm very happy. I'm very excited. I also would like to thank all the people that contribute to this event. Very, very much interesting event. Very, very, very much thankful for the.
What's your personal takeaway?
It's a lot. I mean, it is like you see that what is the focus of the conference. Can talk about it a little bit later now. It is exactly what the industry is like is telling us. What are their problems? What they are like ambition? What they want to do? So this is like a really on the focus of the conference, which is like really, really nice to see and to hear.
Could you please present the I said ETFA, but ETFA conference in brief?
Yeah, ETFA or ETFA, it's Emerging Technology and Factory Automation. It is sponsored by IEEE and Industrial Electronics Society, together with Mälardalen University for this year. This is the 26th time that conference has been held. It's like an annual conference, and the focus is what is mentioned. It's like emerging technologies and factory automation. So these are the focus areas for the conference.
What kind of attention has the event sparked this year?
I mean, definitely, it's like digitalization is like the more focus. It's coming a lot of like AI focus. We see that many research that's like have been submitted and accepted. They are like on AI, on the edge, on the robotics, like sensor networks, like automation. So it's more on this digitalization journey that the industry is in the current state trying to go through.
Tell us a little bit more about the program for the coming days.
Yes, we have Industry Day, which was like very, very nice event, I would say. We also have a few workshops like during the day today, some on the automation, some on AI, and also on vehicle systems. And we have also an event for the women in Industrial Electronics Society. And then from tomorrow, Wednesday, until Friday, we have the technical sessions. And the areas that they are covering is not very small area. It's quite big area covering it's not all aspects, but many aspects that are needed for the industrial automation. So from as I mentioned, AI, 5G, automation, industrial automation. So there are like many sessions, interesting sessions. So that would be probably really interesting for the people probably to join and listen to what the advancements has been done in this area. I can also mention that the participants of the conference, they are not only from academia, so they're not like the people from universities. We have many researchers from industry. They have sent contributions, and they will be presenting their work. So this conference is like really doing most of the research is like on the applied research. So it is very much connected with the industry and the needs from the industry.
What a great mix of participants and what relevant topics.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Professor Bino.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Beata, for guiding us through this day. And I would also like to thank all of you out there. We're coming to an end of this morning session. You've been following us from various platforms. And all in all, we've been having more than 300 participants joining us today. I'm so happy about that. So we'll be listening to interesting keynotes and an interesting panel, and I'm so happy also that we got the announcement from Jenny and Vinnova on the exciting news with more collaboration, more investments, and us working even more in creating the future. We can see there's a need for collaboration, industry, academia, basic research, applied research. Happy to see everything like Ericsson show us with the use cases where they really go with the new technology out to collaborate with partners. Because it's very much of the speed of implementation, as I see it. In my day-to-day work out in the industry, I can see that the competitiveness comes with the speed of implementation of the opportunities that we have. So in a bit of a challenge, it should not only be inspiration and insights, but only some concrete action. This rewire the way we work. So I challenge you to throw something old out and bring something new in and deliberately take a step towards the future in your company to create the competitiveness. That way we will have had a successful conference, I should say. I will now wish you at the ETFA success in the conference that will be online here until September 10th. And I would also like to invite you all to a bit of an informal lunch session together with Helena Blackbright. You all have a link in the chat that you can follow, and you will be with us soon again. Again, from all of us at Automation Region, thanks for joining, and see you again at lunch.